identified this very quickly and remediated the issue. And as systems come back online, as they're rebooted, they're coming up and they're working. And now we are working with each and every customer to make sure that we can bring them back online. But that was the extent of the issue in terms of a bug that was related to our update.
Mr. Kurtz, it's Savannah here in Milwaukee. I mean, you're in the cybersecurity business, and I certainly don't even pretend to understand this, but according to your statement, it was a single content update that has managed to shut down air travel, credit card payment systems, banks, broadcast, street lights, 911, emergency, around the globe. Why is there not some kind of redundancy or some sort of backup? How is it that one single software bug can have such a profound and immediate impact?
Well, when you look at the complexity of cybersecurity, you're always trying to stay one step ahead of the adversaries. Excuse me. Man, just 1 second, please.
Oh yeah, take a drink of water.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sure it's been a long night.
It's been a long night. We're always trying to stay one step ahead of the adversaries. And in this particular case, our systems are always looking for the latest attacks from these adversaries that are out there. So this content update went out, and as it does, and it's been doing for many, many years, obviously we've got a robust team that's looking at the safety and security and the quality of these updates, and we have to go back and see what happened here. But if there's a negative interaction with the way some of these operating systems work, in this particular case it was only the Microsoft operating system that was impacted, you'll see a reaction like this, and this is what we've seen here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people woke up and wondered if something nefarious was afoot, if this was some kind of a cyber attack. But you're saying that it was just something within your own system. So now, as we sit here, I was watching the news out of Australia. They were trying to get their television stations back on the air, their hospital software back up and running, the banks going. How long does it take to get everything back up and running?
Well, yeah, first and foremost, again, just to reinforce what you said, it wasn't a cyber attack. It was related to this content update. And as you might imagine, we've been on, with our customers all night and working with them. Many of the customers are rebooting the system, and it's coming up and it'll be operational because of, we fixed it on our end. And some of the systems that aren't recovering, we're working with them. So it could be some time for some systems that just automatically won't recover. But it is our mission, is why we're here, to make sure that every customer is fully recovered, and we're not going to relent until we get every customer back to where they were, and we continue to protect them and keep the bad guys out of their systems.
Did you ever think, Mr. Kurtz, that you could experience something like this? I mean, does the breadth of this surprise you?
Well, when you look at software, it is a very complex world, and there's a lot of interactions, and always staying ahead of the adversary is certainly a tall task. So obviously, you try to understand and mitigate them. And in some cases, you have a weird interaction, and it didn't seem like it happened on every Windows system. There's different versions and flavors and patch levels, if you will, and we're just trying to sort out where that negative interaction was. And again, that's what we're focused on, getting customers back up and running.
CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz, we appreciate after this happened and explain your company's point of view. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, that was our colleagues at NBC's Today Show, Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb, interviewing George Kurtz, the CEO of CrowdStrike, who did being pressed on the breadth of how this happened, seemingly so simply with just an internal glitch, as it were. His response was to say that they're always looking for the potential attacks from adversaries and therefore sending out regular updates to try and prevent those. And they'll have to go back and look to see exactly what happened with certain Microsoft Windows operating systems when there was a...
So we're going to continue with this news here. It's an global IT disaster. Global outage. Global. What you mean global? Global. I mean, it affected, it's still on now. It's affecting banks, flights, broadcasting stations, other businesses around the world. It's affected today. And it's serious. One thing that if you're a Christian, you just know what I'm talking about. So if you're not a Christian, just think of becoming one. But anyway, what just came to my mind is rapture. If when Jesus comes to take his people, this is what's going to happen. Everything is going to be worldwide chaos. Worldwide. Airline, just name it. What? Anyway, let's go back to the news and see what is going on. This is happening. Oh, this is serious. When I saw it, when I woke up very early in the morning, maybe around 4 or so, 5, I saw something like this, that there was IT, problem around the world. And I'm thinking, are they just discussing what is it? I just push it aside. I didn't even think about it. Otherwise, I would have jumped on it at that moment. So we're bringing it in the latest news, and let me know what you think about this situation. Thank you.
Clash between this update they sent out.
Leave it until the weekend when systems are going to be used less. So again, I think there are questions there. It was interesting also that he specifically talked about Microsoft, and as we've been reporting, there was no mention of. He was clear in his tweet earlier that this doesn't affect Mac or Linux users. It's only a Microsoft issue. And CrowdStrike have been very, very critical of Microsoft in recent months. And there's obviously a bit of needle between those two companies, even though they are close business partners.
Ian, great stuff. Thanks as always. And Tom, as I mentioned, is here as well. Tom, it's interesting. In the part of the interview we saw, you felt there was a gist of saying, well, we have to stay ahead of the adversaries, those that want to cause harm, as if to excuse, an error internally that causes probably more harm than any of us would imagine is likely, at least, let alone, maybe not plausible, from external bad actors.
Yeah, there's one line in that interview from the CEO of CrowdStrike where he said, we continue to protect our customers and keep the bad guys out of their system. I think they'd rather keep the good guys out of the system based on what's happened. The other issue with that, I mean, again, this is a tiny update, and his tone a lot of that was mistakes happen, as you're saying, and that doesn't really wash. Like, this shouldn't happen. This is probably the biggest outage in history. To say that, well, hey, this stuff happens. It was tiny. It was a small update, 41 kilobytes, a bit of code, absolutely minuscule. For it to have this cascading effect is extraordinary, both in terms of it going out in the first place, this interaction with systems, even if it is complicated, for that to have that effect is just extraordinary. And he also said, well, we're working to make sure every customer is fully recovered. Every customer is, we're talking millions of people across the world. This is a huge, huge thing. This isn't just going back one by one. And he's also saying it automatically won't recover automatically. So again, they have to go and do this manually. This is, going to keep cascading down, really. We're also seeing all sorts of issues. But people are just going to have to fix it, like we've been doing here at Sky, computer by computer. They've been doing that without CrowdStrike's help to start with. Even if the CEO said they identified it promptly, it's engineers who've been having to go, actually, we're going to take that bit of code you sent to us to keep us safe. We're taking that out now so we can get back up to speed.
Perhaps it's a small saving grace for a cyber security company that they weren't, in fact, hacked. But nonetheless, not a greatly reassuring interview from the CEO of CrowdStrike. In terms of the repercussions of all of this and how it's affected people, of course, travel has been one of the main areas that have seen pronounced consequences. And Simon Calder, a travel expert, able to join us on this. Simon, in terms of the scale of, particularly, I mean, I can see you're outside a tube station, but particularly at airports, have we seen a level of disruption to this extent for recent years or not?
We have, and let me take you back, Wilfred, to August bank holiday last year, really the end of the last peak summer season. Today is the beginning of the peak summer season, and you might recall that we had an IT failure at NATS, the air traffic control system, and their backup system promptly fell over as well. That resulted in hundreds of flight cancellations, tens of thousands of people being stranded in various parts of the world. And would you believe, on the busiest day we have seen since 2019, everybody in the aviation industry, as well, of course, as about 1 million passengers planning to fly in and out of UK airports today, were just hoping for the best. And very first thing we saw these messages, Ryanair, biggest budget airline in Europe, coming out and saying, yep, you can't check in online. You're going to have to do it manually at the airport. We won't charge you money for that. But of course, that slows everything down. They then said, get to the airport 3 hours ahead or more. The airports, meanwhile, having their own problems. And of course, this, as we've been hearing, affects everything from online check-in to bag drops to internal airport systems to aircraft departure procedures. Everybody is kind of having to go back to analog basics. Everything's taking a long time. And I've just got the latest cancellation numbers in for flights. We're seeing 1,400 flights so far worldwide cancelled. That's obviously extremely annoying. That's going to affect roughly, I reckon, about 1 million people. But on top of that, we've got in the UK specifically, we're now over 100 cancellations of departures and arrivals. Now, that needs to be seen in the context of the 3,000 or so departures we were expecting. So most people are getting where they need to be. The trouble is, they're getting there late. 2 hour, if you get to your destination, you're only 2 hours late. Well, count that as a success. And besides the cancellations we've seen at, for instance, Heathrow on British Airways, Gatwick on EasyJet, Wizz Air from Luton, we undoubtedly will see, as the day goes on, as those delays build up, we will find planes, pilots, cabin crew out of position, unable to complete their rosters for the day because they've simply run out of time. And if that happens, unfortunately, passengers are going to find they get to the airport, they've checked in, they've waited around, and the flight is cancelled. Now, I can tell you what your rights are when that happens. The airline has to get you an alternative flight, any airline at all, but they also have to find you a hotel. Both of those are going to be easier said than done.
Simon, thanks so much for joining us. Very much appreciated. Simon Calder there with the latest on the scale of the transport disruption that we're seeing. We're going to have much more on this unfolding global news story after this short break here on Sky News.
Inside just to see if we can have a chat with some passengers who clearly feeling the impact of this chaos here today, albeit organised chaos. It's worth noting just before we go inside that when you last came to us about 20 minutes ago, this was the security queue. It was stretching for hundreds of metres down in that direction. Well, clearly it's a very different story now. They are processing people, they're getting things back up and running. But we step inside the terminal building, it's starting to get a bit more busy. It's starting to feel like people have questions about whether their flights will indeed be taking off. Right down in the far direction is the Ryanair desk, and I can tell you that earlier on today Ryanair was communicating that their electronic ticketing system was down and they were having to issue manual tickets, so you can imagine the chaos that was causing upstairs with the electronic ticketing system and the processing of that. Let's have a chat with some passengers here. Hi there, you're on Sky News at the moment. What's the situation in terms of your flight? You're standing here in the terminal building.
Yeah, we were supposed to go to Germany, Cologne, and our flight was 1:15, but we've just been told that it's been cancelled.
And what does that mean then for the kind of knock-on impact of your wider journey?
Well, apart from losing financially, the hotel bookings, the time aspect, it's just a real hassle.
Talk to me, if you don't mind me asking, how much potentially could you be out of pocket as a result of this?
Maybe £2,000. It's my birthday today, actually, so we're going there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We're going there for my birthday.
£2,000, and that in the cost of living crisis, you wanted to get a special treat. That must be a real impact.
Yes, it is. So we are busy trying to see how we can go with other flights.
And have you scrapped the idea of going away altogether now because of all this, or what are you thinking?
Well, I don't want to think about that just now.
Just go home and try
But
to
just
sleep.
go home and sleep.
Well, good luck and happy birthday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let's see if we can have a chat with a few other folks. Let's go over here and see what people are thinking. Good afternoon. Sorry, you're on Sky News. Do you have a view at all about the situation here at the airport? We'll come round here.
Well, I know obviously it's busy with everything that's happened this morning, but we've just arrived quite recently, so we're just waiting on our flight coming up. So hopefully we'll be okay.
And where are you due to be head to?
We're heading to Berlin.
Berlin. And what has the airline and the airport been saying to you?
Well, since I've got here, I mean, the screens have been updated pretty well. We've not actually spoken to anyone, but everything seems fine, so we're just waiting.
So lunchtime, our top story, individuals and companies around the world have faced major disruption from what is, if not the biggest, close to the biggest IT outage of all time. It comes from Windows devices that have a partnership with the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, and we've heard recently from the CEO of CrowdStrike, who did confirm it was not from a cyber attack, that they had identified the issue and rolled out a fix, albeit the disruption is certainly still being felt wide and far. Let's bring in now Connor Gillis, who's at Edinburgh Airport for us today. And Connor, just before the break, we were talking with Simon Calder about the scale of the disruption that air travellers have been experiencing. What's it like there in Edinburgh?
Well, Wilfred, this is the human face of this IT glitch that's caused chaos around the world. We're here at Edinburgh Airport, where officials are saying it's their most chaotic day since the pandemic, the most severe impact felt by passengers. We arrived a couple of hours ago. At that stage, the queue for security seemed to be moving at pace. People seem to be moving through in an orderly fashion. But officials here have confirmed that in terms of the flight arrivals and flight departures, they are operating now on a one-in, one-out basis. So if an aircraft is destined for Edinburgh, it will land as planned. However, if the aircraft has not left its original destination, then that will not happen because there is simply no space. And this is the impact. Hundreds of people standing, not going anywhere, not moving. And I can tell you that frustration seems to be building for some passengers. Let's chat to Anne-Marie. She was due to head to Tenerife this lunchtime. How are you feeling about this?
So upset. We stood when we arrived early because I knew there was going to be problems. Arrived here at 10:15. Our flight's to take off at 1:45. The guy came up and says, "Where are you flying to?" We went Tenerife. We went, "Right, stay where you are." So like Dublin, other flights were getting called. So I asked his husband, "Right, I'll be smart. I'll go through to security because the queue's already out by the trams." Gets a wait security. I managed to get up over security, phone my husband a bit. Still, and then he says to me, "Our flight's been cancelled. Our flight's gone. We've shut the gate." And I went, "Oh my God, I'm coming back down." I phoned Ryanair and they said, "Right, if you speak to them at the desk," spoke to them at the desk and says, "Can we put our case through?" They went, "We can't do anything, the gate's closed." So I spoke to Ryanair and I said, "Please, can I got them to speak to them." Still not. So we have a big party tonight. It's my special 60th birthday today and going nowhere.
And does communication seem to be the biggest issue?
Communication was a massive issue, yeah.
All right, all the best. Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Just one final thing to note here. There doesn't seem to be any boards to communicate issues to these passengers. We have had personnel from the airport and from the airlines shouting, not very loud it has to be said, to passengers to ask them to come forward as Ryanair continue to manually check people in with no electronic ticketing system at all.
Connor, thanks so much for that update from Edinburgh Airport. Well, as we wrap up the hour, we wanted to get to another major story of the day. And one person has died and 4 people have been injured in Israel after a drone strike near the US Embassy. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for the attack. And we're able to discuss this now with an Israeli government spokesperson, David Mentzer. David, thanks so much for joining us. What can you tell us about this attack?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on, Wilf. Look, this was a little bit too close for comfort because this was just literally behind where I live with my family at 3:12 this morning. My wife and I were woken up. Not only was the room shaking, but a massive explosion, the sorts of things that you see in Marvel movies is the only thing I can compare it to. We were attacked last night from the Houthis, a terrorist organization not only here in Israel, but also in the UK. They're after us. Unfortunately, if only they were just trying to support the Palestinians. They're not. They're after Jewish blood. They claimed a life in Tel Aviv yesterday, but this is not going to work for them because the Prime Minister has made extremely clear Whoever sets out to harm us, we will harm them, and they will feel the pain, and it will be a deterrence.
David, how rare is it, how scary is it for an attack like this to be successful where it was in Tel Aviv?
Look, Wilf, Israel has an extremely impressive array of defensive technology to take care of these sorts of things. And we're getting sometimes 90, sometimes 95% of success when it comes to these sorts of attacks. This one slipped through, which made it all the more shocking. But let's not forget, this attack came just meters away from the branch office of the US Embassy here in Tel Aviv, not in the embassy itself, which is in our capital in Jerusalem, but their branch office here in Tel Aviv. So it's unclear at the moment whether that was their target. But either way, it claimed the life of the Tel Avivi who was doing nothing more than sleeping in his bed. This was not a military target. This was a civilian target. They went after our people. They killed one. But our policy is extremely clear. Whoever sets out to harm us, they will be harmed.
Can I just ask, you mentioned the Prime Minister there. He was due to go to New York, to Washington, excuse me, to meet with President Biden. Many reports that meeting is now off. Can you give us an update on that?
The latest information I have, Wilf, is that that meeting is very much on. The Prime Minister of Israel will become the international leader that has spoken to both houses of Congress more than any other international leader ever before in history. And it's a very important relationship that we're shoring up here, this US-Israeli relationship. It's a bipartisan relationship. President Biden has stood side by side with this country. They've had a bigger impact on the Houthis themselves, taking down their suicide drones in the Red Sea even before they come close. And of course, that bipartisan relationship means that Israel will do everything in its power to ensure that nothing harms that relationship. That trip is going on as to my latest knowledge.
David, very quickly, forgive me for the short amount of time on this. What's your view on the government here restoring funding to UNRWA?
Well, I'll be quite frank with you, Wilf. UNRWA, we know, is just been funneling money. That's the long and the short of it. They've been funneling money and supporting Hamas. We've provided all this evidence internationally to the government of the UK as well. It's a big mistake, I've got to tell you, because we've got evidence as long as your arm to show the complicity, the nexus between UNRWA and Hamas.
I'm sorry I gave you so little time on that final question. We thank you so much for joining us, particularly about the incident in Tel Aviv. That does it for this hour of Sky News. We'll have all the very latest on the global IT outage up next.
So we can check in our bags.
All right, good luck. Safe trip if it happens. Well, that's the situation here at Edinburgh Airport. One of the worst effects, I think it's fair to say, in the UK, stretching right down the terminal building here. People are queuing, they're asking for information. And as the woman that we were just speaking to has pointed out, many will have questions about the personal, financial impact of all of this. £2,000 for that couple out of pocket, their holiday, their break away gone. Questions about finances, compensation, all of that will come in the days, weeks and months ahead. But right now here at this airport, it's about getting things back on track, communicating to passengers amid this chaos. I think it's fair to say, though, it could get worse before it gets better in terms of delays and cancellations.
What I would say, Anna, looking at some of the reaction that you're seeing across news websites around the world from IT specialists. I mean, we were chatting about half an hour ago, and I was reminding viewers about the so-called Millennium bug, Y2K bug, as was called at the time. And obviously, it was a huge beanfest for the IT support services industry at the time. IT consultants made out like bandits, advising companies around the world about how to prevent themselves against this bug. And of course, it didn't come to pass. farce. And as I said, there was no counterfactual. We didn't really know whether there would have been a catastrophe because most companies invested very heavily to prevent that outcome. But there seems to be a body of opinion now among IT specialists that this is the kind of thing that we would have seen potentially around Y2K. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is right now the biggest IT outage of all time. I think this is going to be a very, very big moment in history. I don't think it's an over-exaggeration. Bear in mind what I was saying to you earlier. CrowdStrike, one of the key providers of endpoint protection, as it's known in the industry. It has a 24% market share. It's very, very closely linked to Microsoft, the world's biggest IT services company, and accordingly...
Afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. You're watching Sky News. Our major breaking news this afternoon. We're deeply sorry. Those are the words from CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz after a massive IT outage has caused chaos worldwide. The meltdown has hit infrastructure around the world, with aviation, banking, healthcare, and the financial services among the sectors affected. Here at Sky News, we've also been affected by the outage, which is why things are looking a little bit different today in our coverage. Well, cybersecurity giant CrowdStrike confirmed the issue came from a defect in a content update for its Microsoft Windows users. In short, a flaw in a software update pushed out to customers who happen to be using Windows PCs. CrowdStrike is one of the world's largest cybersecurity providers, providing antivirus and cyber attack prevention tools to businesses and individuals. In the last hour, its chief executive, George Kurtz, told NBC News that investigations were underway into what caused such a major glitch. So, what's been the impact? Well, major disruption to the majority of GP practices in England. The health service said patients should attend appointments unless told otherwise and should only contact their GP in urgent cases. At airports around the world, airlines have reported being unable to process passengers and resorted to manually checking in customers, including at Luton Airport. Train services were also disrupted, with ticketing services at some stations impacted. Supermarkets across the UK are only accepting cash as a result of the disruption. You can follow all of the latest updates to this outage in our live blog online, news.sky.com, or on the Sky News app. And there's also a special programme on the global IT outage. That'll be at 8 p.m. this evening here on Sky News. Well, joining me here on set is our data forensics correspondent, Tom Cheshire. Also with us, our business presenter, Ian King. He's in the city of London. Before we get into the team to discuss all of this, in the last hour, as we mentioned, the CEO of CrowdStrike, George Kurtz, spoke to our colleagues on the Today Show on NBC News. Let's listen in.
I want to start with saying we're deeply sorry for the impact that we've caused to customers, to travelers, to anyone affected by this, including our companies. So we know what the issue is. We're resolving and have resolved the issue now. It's recovering systems that are out there. And essentially, as you've talked about in the statement I put out, is the system was sent an update, and that update had a software bug in it and caused an issue with the Microsoft operating system. And we identified this very quickly and remediated the issue. And as systems come back online, as they're rebooted, they're coming up and they're working. And now we are working with each and every customer to make sure that we can bring them back online. But that was the extent of the issue in terms of a bug that was related to our update. It wasn't a cyber attack, it was related to this content update. And as you might imagine, we've been on, with our customers all night and working with them. Many of the customers are rebooting the system, and it's coming up and it'll be operational because of, we fixed it on our end. And some of the systems that aren't recovering, we're working with them. So it could be some time for some systems that just automatically won't recover, but it is our mission, is why we're here, to make sure that every customer is fully recovered, and we're not going to relent until we get every customer back to where they were, and we continue to protect them and keep the bad guys out of their systems.
George Kurtz, the CEO of the company involved, CrowdStrike, speaking to NBC moments ago. As I mentioned, Tom Cheshire's here with me. Tom, maybe there's a tiny saving grace for this cyber security company that they weren't actually hacked, but for all of their customers, businesses including Sky News and many other individuals around the world, it's not much of a saving grace.
No, it's not much of a difference at all. He was saying that we continue to protect our customers, keep the bad guys out of their systems. Perhaps they'd rather have the bad guys there rather than the good guys. In terms of the scale of this, it is extraordinary. All around the world, all these different sectors. He talked about it starting with a defect, and speaking to Sky engineers here, they say it was only 41 kilobytes. That is a minuscule amount of code. Do you think there's a million bytes in a gigabyte, for instance, kilobytes in a gigabyte? This is tiny, tiny. It's had this huge effect. I think what's been quite interesting, though, is like where it's had those effects in terms of the resilience. We're so dependent upon technology, upon the internet. And there has been these really sort of cascading effects. But when it comes to the critical infrastructure, so far at least, it seems like that has been well protected and perhaps speaks to how people arrange it. The Australian Prime Minister said none of their national critical infrastructure had been hit. Speaking when we've been hearing from Cabinet ministers today, there was a Cobra meeting. It was only at the official level, not the minister levels, but they weren't aware of any government business being impacted by it. And I think it's the same when you look at the issues on the rail networks. It's not the tracks, there's not safety there, it's things like crew rosters and passenger information being affected. Same for airports, it's not air traffic control, it's the ticketing systems. Now those are hugely inconvenient and it'll take a long while to fix it. That's what he was also saying in that. And then there are those systems which are slightly halfway through, so GPs and pharmacies. I think that's where we've seen the most serious impact so far. Hospitals appear to be doing okay so far. We've heard from them saying they've had some outages, but nothing major. GPs, the majority of GPs being hit, appointments, patient information. If you need to go and get a prescription, what does that mean? I think that's where we've seen the most harm from this incident.
Tom, thanks so much for setting that up for us. Let's explore now with our team all around the world the scale of the impact this IT outage has had. Connor Gillis is at Edinburgh Airport for us. And Connor, travellers must be devastated by the delays, perhaps even cancellations that they're seeing.
Yeah, this is starting to enter a new phase here at Edinburgh Airport here, where we've had the chaos of the morning, the communication from the airport and the airlines. But let's have a look at this. This is the scene inside the check-in hall here at Edinburgh Airport this afternoon. And I can tell you that it feels chaotic. The screens are nowhere to be seen informing passengers about what is happening, and the way that this particular airline is calling passengers forward to manually check them in via paper, not electronically, is by a number of officials coming forward and simply shouting down the queue, not very loudly at times. But this is the kind of conversation that is happening across this hall. Frustrations building, anger is bubbling up as well, and I think part of the issue here is the communications. Now clearly this is a global IT issue, everyone is grappling with the same issues, but we have spoken to a number of people who have turned up here at the airport today. They have checked in their bags earlier on this morning, and due to the screens not being working, due to the communication issues from the airlines within airports like this one here in Edinburgh, they are discovering half an hour later that actually their flight has gone. It has taken off and their bags have been removed. That is causing frustration here, and clearly, particularly for Ryanair customers, where they're still on a manual check-in, the electronic system's not working. If we actually come down here, let's try and show you a bit of what's happening. So here is where the flights that are going ahead so far, this is where the passengers are being filtered into. And if we just come down and have a look down here, this shows you the manual operation that is underway, that is unfolding with this particular airline, with Ryanair. If we come over and just have a look here, you can see the officials manually checking bits of paper, official documents, checking people's phones and their boarding passes that are not working when it comes to the electronic ticketing system here today, and the question is, how long will this continue? It is a question that there is no answer to at the moment. Let's try and see if we can have a chat with some passengers over here. Sir, do you have a view on the situation here today? What's your situation?
Carnage, absolute carnage. We joined the queue way over there at about maybe 12 o'clock and moved about 10 feet, and there was nobody there. But on the way through, there was a message from you Well, not you, but the guy at the airport saying, "Oh, yeah, everyone's back to, we're going to be back on track, blah blah blah." It's getting worse. There's more and more and more and more people. It's crazy.
I think your flight is being shouted now.
I'm checked in. I need to get my mum in. No,
all right, okay. Well, good luck. And this is part of the issue. The staff are having to shout across this large, vast check-in area to try and communicate their message. I've just had a conversation actually with one of the bosses from Edinburgh Airport to get an update. Earlier on, it was a one-in, one-out policy when it came to airlines touching onto the tarmac here and boarding those passengers. I can now tell you that usually 30 flights an hour arrive in here to Edinburgh. At the moment, around 8 are arriving. That's the latest update that we have. So it's no longer one in, one out. 8 flights arriving per hour. But you can see the scale of the challenge here, and clearly the cancellations, the delays are mounting as the scale of this crisis, the biggest ever potentially in the aviation and airline industry, as that fully comes to pass. But certainly a chaotic situation here in Edinburgh.
Conor, thanks so much for that. Conor Gillis at Edinburgh Airport. Let's now go to Florian Neuhoff, who's at Berlin Airport for us. Florian, have things eased at all there or not?
Well, as you can see, long queues still here at Berlin Airport, where people are desperate to fly to their holiday destinations. And what you're seeing are passengers who are trying to get flights by airlines that have been affected by the outage, either because of the backlog when the airport itself was down, or when by their own systems being out of service. The airport has resumed transport and flights and landings since 10 a.m. after a 3-hour outage. So flights are taking off, and some people are coming to the airport now who haven't even heard of anything being wrong and who are taking their flights as normal. Others have been here for hours. They're desperate. Their flight's been cancelled and they don't know how to get home. So a mix of desperation and relief here in Berlin.
Very interesting kind of spread of emotions there, Florian. Thank you so much. Let's bring in Ian King now. He's live in the City of London for us, as he has been all morning on this. Ian, before we get into the specific sort of market reaction, just remind us what CrowdStrike is, this company.
Well, CrowdStrike has been one of the darling stocks on Wall Street this year. It's been one of the very best performers in the S&P 500, valued at the close last night at $83 billion US. You were mentioning George Kurtz there. He was the co-founder of that. He has more than a quarter of a century's worth of experience in this field. He actually qualified as an accountant, but founded a business in 1999 called Foundstone, which was an antivirus protection business. And he sold that in 2004 to McAfee, another big player in this particular field, for $86 million. So he's been a wealthy man for quite some time now. He's a billionaire several times over right now. And the story goes that he was actually on an air flight where he sat next to a fellow passenger and watched as this guy took 15 minutes to download his McAfee software onto his computer and thought, we're not doing this well enough. We can do something better. And that was when he founded CrowdStrike in 2011. The business came to prominence after, in 2015, the Democratic National Convention or Conference was hacked by a Russian state entity known as Fancy Bear. It led to all sorts of speculation that the Russians had tried to interfere with the 2016 US presidential election. And that was really what got him going. The fact that they were able to identify and nullify this threat really put him on the map. And it also speaks to the way that the industry in which they operate has evolved over the years. This is known as endpoint protection. Now, initially, it was simply antivirus software, but over the years, it's evolved into a whole panoply of IT services, including network connectivity, threat detection, device management, and really the key thing that it does now is secure the connections between networks and the devices that plug into them from remote locations. And that's really the key service that they provide. And it's made them the market leader in this field of end protection. They have a 24% market share compared with McAfee, Mr. Kurtz's former employer, who are on 9%. So they're a very, very big business indeed. And as I say, a real Wall Street darling. The shares have risen by some 50% this year. And really, you could say, I mean, you know all about these things, Wilf, in terms of how stock market valuations work. when I say to you last night that this business was valued at $83 billion, if I tell you that its annual revenues in the year to the end of April this year was only $3.3 billion US, you can see that there's a hell of a lot of hope value invested in this business. The shares are off some 10% in pre-market. They were off considerably more than that at one point. I think this is going to be quite a sobering experience for Mr. Kurtz and his shareholders. As I say, he's had a lot of cheerleaders on Wall Street down the years.
Well, certainly, and I mean, 10% for a single-day move is obviously huge, but in light of what has happened, it does feel like there could be a worse move for them, and they're only down 10% as things stand. Ian King, thanks so much for that. We do have a bit of breaking news coming across, which we're going to get to actually in just a moment. And in the meantime, in fact, no, we can get to it just now. It's of a different story. We've been, of course, talking of late about the journalist, the Wall Street journalist, Evan Gershkovich, and a Russian court has just jailed him for 16 years after convicting him of espionage. That's according to state media. We heard, of course, in recent weeks how his trial was taking place behind closed doors. We heard in the last couple of days that the Russian prosecutors were seeking some 18 or 20 years, and it looks like they've got most of that. 16 years is the sentence for the US Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who's been found guilty of espionage, and that's according to the Russian state media. I'm just scanning more of this release to see if there's anything more we can bring you on this that we don't yet know, but it looks like that's the headline, and we'll bring you more on it in due course when we have it. Going to bring you back to our main story of the day, of course, the news that a major global IT outage has caused chaos, frankly, for businesses and individuals. And Tom Cheshire's back here with me. And Tom, we're just talking to Ian King about exactly what CrowdStrike is. It's obviously a cyber security company, and their customers who also use Microsoft Windows are the ones that have been affected. The CEO did confirm, though, that it wasn't a cyber attack, that they had found what was wrong and issued an update. Yet many people are still feeling the repercussions. Talk us through why that is exactly.
I think there's a couple of things, and the cyber attack line is really, really important, because, and we can talk about why, but this was a layer that sits on the surface. So when the internet was, sorry, not for the history lesson, but here we go, all the way into the midst of time, when the internet's invented by the US Department of Defense back in the day, it's supposed to be a decentralized network, so you can communicate when there's a nuclear strike. If one point fails, it's rerouted around, and then, you know, you've got this system which is not foolproof, but it's really, really resilient. As it's become more and more part of our lives, it's still the same sort of architecture. It still, you know, runs around the place. But sitting on top of all of that are these really, really big companies. So some of those are things like Microsoft, for instance, which is running a lot of the operating systems. But then also when it comes to Microsoft operating in the cloud, they'll also use cybersecurity companies like CrowdStrike. And because there are these big, big companies, if they have this one point of failure, then that can cause issues for everyone. Now, that's not to say this should happen regularly. It's a really, really big error. And talking about the share price and that sort of apologies being made, you're starting to see that, the effects it's having. But because everything has become more centralized, when something does go wrong, we've seen this with other cyber incidents, it can have this really, really big effect. Now, that line about a cyber attack, you know, it has been a really bad day for so many companies around the country, for so many customers, millions and millions of people have been affected by this. It's a huge incident. But it doesn't, they're saying it wasn't a cyber attack, and I think that is sort of reflected in what we're seeing. It's a lot of the user-facing stuff rather than the really critical stuff. If you think back to other attacks we've had in the past, which have been cyber attacks, for instance, when, you know, WannaCry ransomware went through hospitals, it took hospitals offline. That was a deliberate cyber attack. You think other infrastructure. That's the sort of thing that adversaries, were it ever to come to that, would be looking at. We wouldn't be thinking this is something that's going to be resolved quickly. It could be a lot worse than what we're seeing today. It's kind of a dry run almost for what it might look like.
Well, perhaps, though, it wouldn't be as widespread, though, and that's the sort of downside of this being something that was internally caused by error, because every single one of their customers has been affected by it. When you see those targeted hacks, it's often trying to focus on an individual company or sector to hold them to ransom, which is not the case here.
Dan, that's a really good point, and maybe because it's less critical, more people are affected, so shallow rather than deep. And that's the question when it comes to resilience. Actually, we really want to protect those deep things, whether it's the railway networks, whether it's traffic lights, whether it's sewage, whether it's the power grid, things like that get a lot of that deep protection. When it's actually something like this, which is a sort of surface layer for so many people, but the disruption is massive, and it does have, real world consequences, especially when we're talking about GPs and hospitals, things like that.
Tom, thanks again for setting it all up for us. And we've been talking about the way this has affected people, and travellers and air travellers in particular have been severely affected. We're able to bring in now Dean Seddon from Gatwick Airport. Dean, thanks so much for Dean Snedden, from Gatwick Airport. Dean, how long have you been at the airport for?
We've been here for nearly 7 hours at the check-in desk at Gatwick South Terminal.
And what kind of news did you get of what had happened, what is happening? When did it all kind of reach you?
So when the problem emerged at first, everybody thought it was just a glitch in the system. So we were told it would be about an hour. And here we are, 7 hours 20. We were due to take off at 10. So we don't know at the moment. The biggest concern at the moment is that the crew might run out of, legal hours that they can operate. So we may end up with our flight being cancelled.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Dean. Absolute nightmare for you. Do you know at this stage, is it something that's affected the whole airport? Is it specifically just your airline? Do you have any further details?
Yeah. So from what we've heard here, just speaking to people, the biggest issue at holding up at the moment is that the systems can't communicate with, particularly the US government, in terms of who can enter with visas and what have you and ESTAs, and that's the major issue. Some of the systems have been fixed, but obviously they can't let us on a plane because, we might not be allowed into the country.
So, I gather from that you're due to fly to the US. Is it just people at Gatwick that are due to fly to the US that continue to be affected? Have other routes got up and running, or are there massive lines and massive numbers of people in a similar boat as you?
So our airline here is queued round the building. There's hundreds and hundreds of people. I'd say like 600 people queuing. Something like that. But it seems to be every airline that's trying to go international. Chewy's got the same problem, and Vueling's have the same problem. They've cancelled all their flights. So it seems to be anybody who's going international where there is a visa regime, shall we say, whereas EasyJets here don't seem to have the problem.
You seem remarkably sort of resilient. Not necessarily upbeat, but you're being very considerate with us in terms of telling us all about. You must be devastated. What is the mood there for passengers like you and others in a similar situation?
Yeah, everybody's tired. That's the big thing. And you're kind of sat here going, are we flying? Are we not? And we can't make plans. So for an example, if I went and booked with another airline that can get through because they're doing something manual, I would not get a refund as it stands right now. Yeah. So I have to wait for the flight to be cancelled to actually book another flight.
Well, Dean, we wish you the best of luck with this nightmare delay and IT glitch, and safe travels as and when you do get away. And I hope the stress eases soon. Well, as we saw from Dean there, this global IT outage has caused disruption wide and far, and we're going to have much more on this developing story on Sky News after the short break.
Go inside just to see if we can have a chat with some passengers who are clearly feeling the impact of this chaos here today, albeit organised chaos. It's worth noting just before we go inside that when you last came to us about 20 minutes ago, this was the security queue. It was stretching for hundreds of metres down in that direction. Well, clearly it's a very different story now. They are processing people, they're getting things back up and running. But we step inside the terminal building, it's starting to get a bit more busy. It's starting to feel like people have questions about whether their flights will indeed be taking off. Right down in the far direction is the Ryanair desk, and I can tell you that earlier on today Ryanair was communicating that their electronic ticketing system was down and they were having to issue manual tickets. So you can imagine the chaos that was causing upstairs with the electronic ticketing system and the processing of that. Let's have a chat with some passengers here. Hi there, you're on Sky News at the moment. What's the situation in terms of your flight? You're standing here in the terminal building.
Yeah, we were supposed to go to Germany, Cologne, and our flight was 1:15, but we've just been told that it's been cancelled.
And what does that mean then for the kind of knock-on impact of your wider journey?
Well, apart from losing financially, hotel bookings, the time aspect, it's just a real hassle.
Talk to me, if you don't mind me asking, how much potentially could you be out of pocket as a result of this?
Maybe £2,000. It's my birthday today, actually, so we're going there. Thank you. We're going there for my birthday.
£2,000, and that in the cost of living crisis, you wanted to get a special treat. That must be a real impact.
Yes, it is. So we are busy trying to see how we can go with other flights.
And have you scrapped the idea of going away altogether now because of all this, or what are you thinking?
Well, I don't want to think about that just now.
Just go home and try to sleep.
Go home and sleep.
Well, good luck and happy birthday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let's see if we can have a chat with a few other folks. Let's go over here and see what
Good afternoon and welcome back to Sky News. A reminder of the top story this hour. A IT outage, perhaps the biggest of all time, has caused widespread disruption around the world, including here at Sky News, which is why you are seeing a slightly different, reduced capacity to our broadcasting today. A reminder that this issue stemmed from the cybersecurity company CrowdStrike, in particular for those customers where CrowdStrike and Microsoft Windows are used on your PCs. The CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz said, though, did confirm it was not a cybersecurity attack, but also that they'd identified, isolated and fixed the issue, albeit clearly that fix has not been fully deployed to all customers. Tom Cheshire's here with me. Tom, we've been talking about the way in which this issue has been identified, but clearly the disruption is still being felt. When might that change? How is it possible that they've identified the issue and yet so many people are still being disrupted?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, because it was a very small defect, as they put, oopsie, was more or less what the CEO was saying. Tiny bit of code that has gone in and it's been pushed out to every machine that's running this software, CrowdStrike software, in combination with Windows. And when you sort of start up that machine, actually you can't restart it. And that's what everyone was waking up to. It's what we were waking up to. That's why we don't have an auto queue. It was there earlier, but it's disappeared now. So we're still working through this, basically, as are so many people. And what CrowdStrike is saying, they've put this fix up on their website, but unlike the thing they put out to start with, which just automatically went out, this is something people have to go and get themselves rather than it automatically updating, because these machines are in trouble. So, for instance, at Sky, we've got thousands of computers. You think there's things like servers where we keep all the graphics, lots of archived video. That's how we usually play things out. It's how people watching at home see what's going out. This is all a bit hodgepodge at the moment, getting this stuff out. That means for every one of those machines you have to go into, you have to remove that tiny bit of code that CrowdStrike sent out, get rid of that, restart it, see how it goes, because that might introduce other issues as well. So even though they say this fix is there, it is going to take a long time. If you think how many different companies, how many different countries, millions of customers involved, you're having to go and update every one of those computers. And that's just to fix the issue as it is. You're still going to have those backlogs, which have been caused by not being able to, say, take payments, by not being able to check people in. We've seen people being, up in Edinburgh, being checked in by paper, looking on their phone. It's getting very sort of old school with how people approach it. And so it's going to take a long time to unpick this mistake.
As always, Tom, thanks so much for setting that up. We've been talking about the impact, of course. Travellers, particularly air travellers, have been feeling this the most. So we're able to bring in now Nicole Johnson, who's in Beijing for us. Nicole, I guess you started to learn about this before the rest of us and have touched on before the chaos that's affected travellers across Asia and Hong Kong airports further afield as well.
That's right. We first heard about this in the Southern Hemisphere. Australia and New Zealand woke up to the news. The major broadcasters there were off air. Channel 10 was down. Sky News Australia, large parts of the national broadcaster, the ABC, also went down. And the major airports there, Sydney and Melbourne, massive delays. Virgin Australia had a lot of problems. Flights were getting in and out, but long delays at those airports there. And it extended beyond there. People in Australia trying to go to grocery stores, supermarkets, found that they couldn't pay. Problems also at universities, some parts of Victorian Police, some of the major companies, Commonwealth Bank, the biggest bank in Australia, Optus, the telecommunications company. So Australia has been particularly hard hit. The impact has also stretched across Asia. In Singapore, Changi Airline, one of the major airlines in this airports in this region, big delays there with problems with Air Asia and Vietjet. Malaysia had rail problems and also delays at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Hong Kong, reports of chaos and delays. They also had to revert to manual ticketing there just to be able to get people in the air and away. So these problems have stretched across the region. In Thailand, difficulties with online payments, problems at some of the hospitals, and people have been told to get to the airports in Thailand 4 to 5 hours ahead of time. So really a difficult situation across the region. Less of an impact here in China, though, but it is being felt, and we are getting reports of problems with reservations for hotels in both Shanghai and here in Beijing.
Nicole Johnson, thanks so much for that. A full day for Nicole Johnson dealing with this outage as it gets dark there in Asia. We're going to continue our coverage of this global IT outage in just a moment, but we brought you that breaking news just moments ago that Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, had been handed down a 16-year sentence in Russia. Let's bring in our Ivor Bennett, who's able to join us now with more on this and the context around it, Ivor.
Yeah, well, we were inside the courtroom for the verdict, and it was quite a moment. I think the verdict itself, the guilty verdict, was expected, given the conviction rates of the Russian legal system here, 99% conviction rate. So the verdict itself was expected, but that doesn't make this any less significant. This is a major moment, don't make no mistake about it. An American journalist convicted of espionage here in Russia and sentenced to 16 years in prison. And it's a mark, I think, of just how low relations have sunk between Russia and the US. The last American journalist to be accused of spying here in Russia was Nicholas Danilov back in 1986 at the height of the Cold War. He was released without charge in a prisoner exchange after 13 days. Evan Gershkovich has just been convicted and sentenced, let's say, to 16 years behind bars. And don't forget, he's already spent 16 months in prison following his arrest back in March. It was here in Yekaterinburg that he was arrested on a reporting trip for the Wall Street Journal, who he was accredited as a journalist with to work here in Russia. But Russia says he was spying for the CIA, gathering secrets, they claim, on a tank factory nearby. And Moscow has previously claimed that he was caught red-handed. They've never produced any evidence, publicly at least. And if they produced it during the trial, we didn't get to see it, of course, because the trial itself was behind closed doors. No media allowed in, not even family members. Gershkovich, his employer, the Wall Street Journal, and his government, the US government, have all denied the charges, with the Wall Street Journal calling this a sham trial. What we do know about it is that it moved very quickly indeed. This was all concluded after just 3 hearings. The closing arguments began this morning and finished around lunchtime, when the judge then retired to consider their verdict before delivering it a couple of hours later. That speed of the trial has fueled speculation that a prisoner exchange might be afoot, because Russia, in the past, has liked to conclude legal proceedings before making any kind of prisoner swap, prisoner exchange. But when asked on that today, Dmitry Peskov, Vladimir Putin's spokesman, said the following: "I'm leaving that question without an answer, so make of that what you will. Nothing confirmed on that front yet. The focus for now clearly is the guilty verdict of Evan Gershkovich on espionage charges and his sentence to 16 years in a Russian jail."
As you said, I think it was widely expected that he would be convicted. As you said, the scale of the punishment seems pretty big, 16 years. You were there in the courtroom as that was confirmed, no doubt, alongside other Western journalists. I just wonder what the mood was amongst those fellow Western journalists, including yourself, as you see a Wall Street Journal reporter handed a 16-year prison sentence.
Well, I think it underlines the level of freedom of expression here in Russia. According to America, according to the American government, according to the Wall Street Journal, Evan Gershkovich was just doing his job as a journalist. He and should be able to freely operate as a journalist. They say journalism is not a crime. I'm an accredited journalist here in Russia, alongside a very few, actually, other foreign journalists, and I was one of only 2 foreign journalists covering this trial. And I think it really highlights the dangers posed to journalists. But we are here to cover what is a huge story, I think, between the underlying the tensions between Russia and the West at the moment, particularly Moscow and Washington. And I'm sure it's not the last we'll hear about this.
Well, Ivor, as always, we thank you for your outstanding coverage there. Ivor Bennett for us there in Russia on the news that Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, has been handed down a 16-year jail sentence. Much more to come here from Sky News this afternoon, including on our top story, the global IT outage that's caused widespread disruption. We'll be right back.
Inside just to see if we can have a chat with some passengers who are clearly feeling the impact of this chaos here today, albeit organised chaos. It's worth noting just before we go inside that when you last came to us about 20 minutes ago, this was the security queue. It was stretching for hundreds of metres down in that direction. Well, clearly it's a very different story now. They are processing people, they're getting things back up and running. But we step inside the terminal building, it's starting to get a bit more busy. It's starting to feel like people have questions about whether their flights will indeed be taking off. Right down in the far direction is the Ryanair desk, and I can tell you that earlier on today Ryanair was communicating that their electronic ticketing system was down and they were having to issue manual tickets. So you can imagine the chaos that was causing upstairs with the electronic ticketing system and the processing of that. Let's have a chat with some passengers here. Hi there, you're on Sky News at the moment. What's the situation in terms of your flight? You're standing here in the terminal building.
Yeah, we were supposed to go to Germany, Cologne, and our flight was 1:15, but we've just been told that it's been cancelled.
And what does that mean then for the kind of knock-on impact of your wider journey?
Well, apart from losing financially, hotel bookings, the time aspect, it's just a real hassle.
Talk to me, if you don't mind me asking, how much potentially could you be out of pocket as a result of this?
Maybe £2,000. It's my birthday today, actually, so we're going there. Thank you. We're going there for my birthday.
£2,000, and that in the cost of living crisis, you wanted to get a special treat. That must be a real impact.
Yes, it is. So we are busy trying to see how we can go with other flights.
And have you scrapped the idea of going away altogether now because of all this, or what are you thinking?
Well, I don't want to think about that just now.
Just go home and try to sleep.
Go home and sleep.
Well, good luck and happy birthday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let's see if we can have a chat with a few other folks. Let's go over here and see what people are thinking. Good afternoon. Sorry, you're on Sky News. Do you have a view at all about the situation here at the airport? We'll come round.
Well, I know obviously it's busy with everything that's happened this morning, but we've just arrived quite recently, so we're just waiting on our flight coming up. So hopefully we'll be okay.
And where are you due to be head to?
We're heading to Berlin.
And what has the airline and the airport been saying to you?
Well, since I've got here, the screens have been updated pretty well. We've not actually spoken to anyone, but for us, everything seems fine. So we're just waiting on our flight opening so we can check in our bags.
All right, good luck. Safe trip if it happens. Well, that's the situation here at Edinburgh Airport. One of the worst effects, I think it's fair to say, in the UK, stretching right down the terminal building here. People are queuing, they're asking for information, and as the woman that we were just speaking to has pointed out, many will have questions about the personal, financial impact of all of this.
Welcome back to Sky News. Good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, a reminder of the top story that businesses and individuals around the world have faced major disruption from one of the biggest global IT outages of all time. To discuss this with me now is Joseph Jarnecki, who's a global security research fellow at RUSI. Thanks so much for joining us, Joe. I mean, the first thing I guess we've learned over the course of the morning from CrowdStrike, the company at the heart of this great IT outage, is that it wasn't in fact an attack by a bad actor.
No, so the reason why we've seen the global IT outages today is CrowdStrike, as you say, a large cybersecurity company, has pushed out a product update which unfortunately has been faulty and has led to having conflicting configurations with Windows operating systems, which has led to the blue screen of death, as we've seen across many different organizations, many different sectors, news, airlines, telecoms, etc.
When you say they've pushed out an update, I mean, I guess lots of tech companies send us updates. How often do cybersecurity companies send updates? And is it a sort of massive rarity for them to make an error like this, in particular if their job is typically trying to prevent outages, whether by updates or prevent them from bad actors?
I think there's a certain degree of irony that we can all accept and appreciate that a cybersecurity company has perhaps, as you say, been involved in one of the largest IT disturbances globally. It's very normal for any technology company to send out updates. Constantly, we try to improve software, improve systems, drive efficiency, part of the benefit of the digital systems that we all rely upon. There have been times in the past where malicious updates have been sent out, which were not in the interest of the company, for example. This is not one of those incidents, but there are certainly considerations and concerns we have about those. Generally, for me, the whole issue underlines the key dependency we have on certain companies within our civilization, within society, on these kind of critical systems which underpin so many of the different functions that we rely upon.
Clearly, as we've been discussing throughout the day, this has only affected those organizations that use CrowdStrike and with it on a Microsoft Windows operating system, and indeed only a certain number of the Microsoft Windows operating systems. There are some that haven't been affected. Will all of those people have known that they also use CrowdStrike, or does it operate in the background from Microsoft? I guess what I'm saying is often individual PC users know when it says, oh, your antivirus software needs to be updated. I don't think any of us had to click that update button to be affected.
So there are roughly around 24,000 organizations globally that use CrowdStrike. There are far more organizations, obviously, that use Microsoft. Within those organizations, we can assume the majority of them are relatively large or care about security. In those contexts, we would like to hope or expect that people have an awareness or understanding of their digital ecosystems. So what kind of products they're running on their systems, what they rely upon. Unfortunately, it's the case that the level of cybersecurity maturity or the level of IT awareness that is mainstreamed across most companies is very low. And I would expect it's quite unlikely that most companies have a very strong understanding of all the different systems they run across their companies. It's also the case that it's incredibly complex and large technology, and we place a lot of trust in large technology companies to run these things for us.
I mean, not that share prices are the be-all and end-all of what this all means, but if we were talking, as we were earlier, that the CrowdStrike share price initially in the pre-market, what time is it? There hasn't fully opened yet, US trade, but initially it fell 20% after the CrowdStrike CEO came out and issued a statement and confirmed it wasn't, in fact, a cyber attack, and they'd identified the problem. It recovered some of those losses, down 10% now. Does that feel to you, for a cybersecurity company, like it is the be-all and end-all? It's just going to be a roughly 10% hit to their reputation, their share price? Or is this much bigger than that?
It's very difficult to tell. I think that many people within the cybersecurity world, many people within the IT world are constantly amazed at the lack of accountability that large technology companies face when they make errors. I think a lot of the time people assume that it's a magical box of technology where no one really understands what happens, and then if a problem occurs, it's forgotten to the mists of time. What we're seeing here is an incredibly high-profile incident, which could potentially have persistent long-term impacts, particularly, as you say, because it's a cybersecurity company, and we would assume that their focus is on the resilience of systems and on ensuring systems can continue to be operating regardless of kind of broader situational concerns.
Why do you think there is often not major accountability for these sorts of things? Is it because too many of us don't fully understand? You've been very patient with my ignorant questions here. So in that sense, I mean, is it because a lot of us don't have enough deep understanding of what does go on when we have these issues, that people not get away with it, but they perhaps don't see the repercussions as fierce as in other industries?
I think there's a lack of understanding with regards to what's gone wrong. Sometimes, and so people don't understand, let's say, whether or not it was a genuine, understandable mistake, or whether or not it was a severe issue that should have been prevented. Additionally, I think if we look at the regulatory frameworks that are currently in place and the legal considerations we have around where liability falls in these contexts, there has not really been that mature a discussion as of yet, or the discussions are ongoing, I would say, around how we want to shape this industry. If we compare and contrast, for example, with aviation, with cars, construction, finance. These are sectors where there are kind of clear health and safety, clear regulations, and industry-led often codes of practice and ways of operating. We are beginning to see that emerge with technology companies. We are beginning to see greater accountability, greater responsibility, but it's also the case that, particularly over the past few years, we've seen successive large-scale incidents or problems. Most of those have not been the mistaken fault of the company, which it has been in this instance. Most have been malicious and therefore can be brushed under the rug to some extent. But in this case, it's a clear illustration of how we need to be a little bit better, probably, at holding technology companies to account.
And then just finally, Joe, I mean, throughout the day, we've been saying this is quite possibly one of the biggest global IT outages of all time. Is it the biggest? How do we measure that?
It's very difficult to tell. I think this gets to the classic problem of how do you assign and estimate cost. If we think about previous large-scale cyber attacks, Kaseya, SolarWinds, WannaCry, particularly WannaCry, which affected the UK NHS, very considerably. There have been attempts subsequently to make financial estimates as to the scale of the cost. This has partly been linked to the insurance industry, for example, trying to determine the level of compensation and also in wider considerations about whether there's fault and there should be repayment. One of the things we always forget when we do this, firstly, it's very difficult to try to understand the cost of technology not working. How do you estimate the lost value of I couldn't access my computer this morning, therefore I couldn't send an email, so couldn't make a big deal, for example? Is that substantial? But then also what we don't think about is the social costs. So if we think about what's happened in the NHS today, where patients have been unable to have appointments booked for them, how do you consider the individual cost of that and weigh it against other attacks? If someone is unable to access healthcare, surely that is a considerable issue. I think what we need at the end of this is a full accounting and understanding of the repercussions of this incident, and as you say, to try to contextualize it within other incidents or issues that have happened in the past, and then to consolidate that information and bring it to technology companies and say, you need to do better.
Joseph Czarnecki, a research fellow at RUSI, thanks so much, absolutely fascinating. Well, we've been talking obviously there and throughout the day about the way this has affected people around the world. Let's bring in our Neville Lazarus, who's in New Delhi for us. And Neville, what has been the impact there in India?
Wilfred, it has been quite a big impact out there, and the most visible has been the aviation sector, especially travellers. We've seen really long queues of passengers in front of buildings of airports across the country, particularly in the major cities of Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. In Bangalore Terminal 1, there have been disruptions of almost 90% of the flights. The flights have been halted or cancelled, and this has had a cascading effect on various sectors in the industry, even in smaller airports and towns where this would have been very disruptive. We've seen effects on the hospitals. One administrator who told me, didn't want to be named, saying that it has had an effect on not only critical care and the machines in the ICU units which use that platform, but also the anxieties of family members, and therefore it has had a big effect on the country so far.
Neville Lazarus, as always, thanks so much for that update of the fallout of this cyber issue from New Delhi. We're going to have much more on that after the short break we're about to take. We're also going to have an update from the police following the riots and fire overnight in Leeds. We'll be right back. The GP practices and hospitals here been affected?
Well, I can speak for GP practices and say they certainly have been. So here at my GP surgery, the IT systems are down, which means we don't know who have appointments, and we also can't access people's records. And it also means that patients are not able to contact us in some ways because the phone systems are integrated with our computer systems. So we are relying on patients coming into the surgery, knowing who they're going to be seeing, and going back to old-fashioned handwriting paper notes.
And how's that working?
It's working okay. Patients are being incredibly understanding, but it's taking time. And I think because people are aware that there's a national problem, people are just that bit more understanding. Obviously, we can offer acute care and medical care that we need to. The other issue is that prescriptions now tend to be mostly electronic, and most doctors like myself very rarely write a prescription. So that is also taking some time because the pharmacy IT systems are also down.
We all have to remember how to do handwriting. It's not easy, speaking from my own experience. Dr. Cannon, in the last year or so, of course, with various pressures on the NHS, we've often talked about the way that today it's much rarer that GPs have a one-on-one relationship with individual patients, and patients kind of have to see whichever GP they get assigned to because it's so hard to get an appointment in the first place. Does that make this sort of scenario a lot harder if you can't access data records, you can't access medical history, and you don't have that personal memory of what patients' history includes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very pertinent question. And also what we're discovering, particularly this morning, is that sometimes patients themselves are not aware of why they've come to the doctor or what they were here for. Perhaps they were here for a review that was asked for by the doctor, or they've been called in to discuss some results. So there's certainly some sort of questions being raised about that. But you're absolutely right. We're able to offer acute care, but not so much with the care that involves somebody's past medical history and background.
The day, the global IT outage in just a moment. But first, an update on the situation in Leeds overnight and the unrest that we witnessed there. This update is coming from the Assistant Chief Constable, Pat Twiggs, and he says there's been understandably a great deal of speculation, commentary and concern following the disorder in Hare Hills, Leeds overnight. The statement is pretty extensive. It gives context that they responded to a call from Children's Social Care at around 5 p.m. Yesterday in response to some social workers saying that they were being met with hostility. And he said at that point they did see the responding officers face escalating disorder, and some damage was caused to vehicles. Several fires were set. Just scanning through the rest of this rather extensive statement, it says a decision was taken to withdraw these officers temporarily as it was evident that the police was their sole target. It allowed for further community mediation to take place in order to calm the situation. The police then returned to the area with fire colleagues to extinguish the remaining fires, which were self-contained and didn't pose a wider risk. Throughout the night, several arrests were made in relation to the disorder, and further arrests will be made in the next few days. They say they've launched a major investigation and, quote, "We will leave no stone unturned in our hunt for all those who are involved, and will work closely with our criminal justice partners to bring them to justice." The statement does go on and towards the end concludes that this was caused by a criminal minority intent on disrupting the community. And ultimately, the final sentence says, "I'd like to thank the Hare Hills community once again for their efforts and support." That's a statement from the Assistant Chief Constable, Pat Twiggs, from Leeds, Hare Hills area, following the disruption last night. Our top story of the day, though, continues to be the global IT outage, which has affected many people across the globe, including Sky News, which is why you have seen reduced coverage, adjusted coverage for us this evening, although I can see things are coming back online. We now have a strap at the bottom of the screen for the first time today. Breaking news, global IT outage hits companies around the world. I didn't need to say it this time. Tom Cheshire's here with me. And Tom, you've been giving us the context all throughout the day. And just remind our viewers what exactly has happened. This was not a cyber attack. It was an error by, ironically, a cybersecurity company.
Yeah, a defect is the word they use, and I think that's a bit of an understatement there. In a single content update, I mean, it is worth pointing out that actually when this was unfolding, it wasn't clear what had happened, and people were just waking up with, the so-called blue screen of death. It did look like what a cyber attack might look like, and this was so widespread. Of course, that's a natural thing to start asking about. It became quite clear quite quickly this was because of CrowdStrike, the cyber security company, which had sent out this update, which affected Windows machines in particular. And as a result of that, they weren't able to start. So for Sky News, for instance, when these computers simply would not switch on. The machines that sort of put out graphics that mean we can play clips that have been pre-recorded, none of that was working. And so along with many other companies had issues with that, and it relies on workarounds, so having to use non-Windows machines, getting around that, while engineers are sort of scrambling to understand what had gone on. Now the issue is, we were hearing from the CrowdStrike CEO that they said they identified it quickly. He did say sorry. He didn't sound very contrite, and actually the initial statement, there was no hint of apology on Twitter when he put that out, on X rather. They might have identified it quickly, and they're saying systems are coming back online. But because of the nature of this, they're going to have to do it one by one. It's going to be a really slow process. So all those delays we're seeing all around in airports, in train stations as well, that problem is probably only going to get worse because people are having to do things by hand and get that. So that backlog is probably still building rather than coming down because they're still working to get those systems back online.
We have a dedicated tech team who are able to do this, and it's still been slow, it's still been laborious, and we're still a long way off getting it all up and running, which does speak to the point that you're alluding to, that for many this disruption might go on for a long period of time, and as we touched on earlier, it is widespread, the number of people that this has affected.
Yeah, hugely widespread, so many different sectors involved as well. And I mean, this just shows you the dominance that Microsoft, for instance, with Windows, and CrowdStrike as a cybersecurity company. These are big companies and a lot goes through them. So if they get it wrong, like they have in this time for CrowdStrike's instance, it has these big effects. So you think of the sectors involved, a train or an airport, GPs being hit, pharmacies being hit, payment systems not working. It is an extraordinary sort of cascading effect all around the world. Different countries not as affected depending on whether they use CrowdStrike and other products. But it speaks to that point about resilience. And I suppose one of the silver linings to this is, as we've looked at that critical national infrastructure. So when we're talking about trains, we're not talking about trains on the tracks. It's things to do with getting the right roster of people. When we're talking about airports, we're not talking about air traffic control. We're talking about checking people in. Now, hugely inconvenient, especially for anyone going on holiday at the moment. But in terms of safety, it seems these things are safe. So it's a huge, very broad effect in terms of the depth of the effect, in terms of potential harm to life. Luckily, in this instance, it seems like this is massively inconvenient rather than anything worse than that.
Just crossing on the wires is a statement from the US Department of Transportation. They're saying they're continuing to monitor the technical issues impacting airlines. Of course, we've been discussing with a lot of our colleagues, both in airports in Asia and in Europe, the ways it's delayed passengers here with a lot of flight cancellations. We've seen the share prices of airlines in Europe decline, albeit only, Tom, by about 1% to 2%. And if you look in the early trade in the US for the American airlines, they're not even down. They're sort of flat at this stage, and we have seen reports of some flight issues for them. But again, it shows the way that kind of, if you look at the market as a guide, at least for the consequences of all of this, that it's not that deep. You're not seeing it that pronounced, even if, as we've been saying, that it's such a widespread issue.
I think that is probably because, as you say, they have identified the issue. So even that reassurance saying, look, we know how to fix this, is going to be painful. It's going to take some time. But it's not, when people don't know what's going on, that's when people panic. We've seen that with previous cyber attacks when, hospitals have been held to ransom, things like this. We know what the issue is, and it is a pain. It's a massive inconvenience, especially when it comes to things like GP surgeries. But they know how to fix it. I think that's why markets maybe are pretty sanguine about it.
Well, we've been looking at pictures from airports. We do have some live pictures of Rome Airport, where we can also see just the scale of the queues and the disruption that have been affecting passengers around the world. A reminder that the CEO of CrowdStrike said it is an issue that's been identified, isolated, and a fix has been deployed, though the fix clearly has not reached all those that have been affected, yes. And a reminder also that the CrowdStrike CEO said that this was not a security incident or a cyber attack. It's an issue, though, that has affected people far and wide. It's affected Sky News directly, which is why the coverage has been reduced, but is slowly building back, as you can see by the graphics that are now available to us. We're going to take a very quick break at the end of this hour. At the top of the hour, we'll have all the very latest on this global IT outage and the rest of the day's news. Don't go anywhere.
I think in this
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Sky News. Our top story, a huge IT outage has wreaked havoc around the world, disrupting airports, trains, the NHS, shops, banks and broadcasters, including us here at Sky News. Why? Well, cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike had an issue that they say believed to be behind the outage, but it was not a security incident or cyber attack. They also say that a fix has been found and is being deployed. The company says the problem occurred when it deployed a faulty update to computers running Microsoft Windows. Travellers around the world are experiencing severe delays and cancellations as airlines grapple with today's IT issues. Heathrow Airport says flights are operational, but the airport is experiencing delays. London Gatwick has warned that passengers may experience delays, but people should still arrive at their scheduled check-in time. Staff at Luton Airport have resorted to manually checking in customers. Manchester Airport says ground handling services for some airlines have been affected. And major disruption has also been reported in Barcelona, Madrid, Rome, Stuttgart and Naples. We're told that the outage is causing disruption in the majority of GP practices in England. Patients are being advised that they should attend appointments unless told otherwise and should only contact their GP in urgent cases. Meanwhile, the National Pharmacy Association says accessing prescriptions from GPs has been impacted and medicine deliveries are disrupted today. Well, just a short time ago, the CEO of CrowdStrike, George Kurtz, spoke to NBC's Today Show. Here's what he had to say.
I want to start with saying we're deeply sorry for the impact that we've caused to customers, to travelers, to anyone affected by this, including our companies. So We know what the issue is. We're resolving and have resolved the issue. Now it's recovering systems that are out there. And essentially, as you've talked about in the statement I put out, is the system was sent an update, and that update had a software bug in it and caused an issue with the Microsoft operating system. And we identified this very quickly and remediated the issue. And as systems come back online, as they're rebooted, they're coming up and they're working. And now we are working with each and every customer to make sure that we can bring them back online. But that was the extent of the issue in terms of a bug that was related to our update. It wasn't a cyber attack, it was related to this content update. And as you might imagine, we've been on, with our customers all night and working with them. Many of the customers are rebooting the system, and it's coming up and it'll be operational because of, we fixed it on our end. And some of the systems that aren't recovering, we're working with them. So it could be some time for some systems that just automatically won't recover. But it is our mission, is why we're here, to make sure that every customer is fully recovered, and we're not going to relent until we get every customer back to where they were, and we continue to protect them and keep the bad guys out of their systems.
George Kurtz there, the CEO of CrowdStrike, the company at the centre of this global IT outage. Well, with me now, our data and forensics correspondent, Tom Cheshire. Tom, what was your key takeaways from his messaging there?
I think it was an improvement on what we had to start with when he started on X with his statement. There was no sorry, despite all the disruption that people were feeling and had been feeling for some hours before. But when it came to that, a lot of that felt like, well, this is stuff that just happens. He says it's complicated. Mm-hmm. We've resolved it. We've got the fix up. And I don't think that's going to really assuage people either way. In terms of the fix being up, fine, they might have published this. People can go IT teams can go and get this. But it's still going to take them a very, very long time to do that, because they're going to have to do machine by machine, because basically they bricked everyone's computers, and any organization has thousands of computers. That's going to take a very long time to do it. So just to say we identified this quickly and there's a fix available, I don't think really cuts it. The good thing about this, though, is what he said about it not being a cyber attack, not being, a deliberate attempt to try and take these systems online. It's not great. Fine, they're a cybersecurity company. You don't want this to happen when they're not trying to do harm. But at least this wasn't someone trying to cause as much damage as they could, because we've seen those being very destructive in the past. This has been extremely disruptive, but it probably hasn't had as much potential harm as a really big cyber attack could. In terms of the sort of way to now get this fixed, I guess we're getting an indication just here at Sky News. We have a massive team of experts trying to fix it when the fix has been deployed, and yet we're still not completely up and running. It kind of gives an indication of how long this might take to sort out. Yeah, and that speaks to the whole process. I mean, screens like this is what we came into today, and this started because this update was just 41 kilobytes big. I mean, a song is about 3,000 kilobytes, right? So this is really, really tiny. And it caused all these issues. Everything Windows wasn't working, so you have to find the workarounds to do that. So any non-Windows machines you can get online and do things with that instead. And at the same time, you have to go and remove that tiny bit of code, take it out of the machines that are affected. So that's why it takes a long time. And then, of course, you get a sort of backlog effect, right? So if you're at an airport, as lots of people are on this Friday, and they're getting held up because check-in's not working, for instance, that is a backlog that just keeps building, even if you do manage to get the systems online. So this is probably something whose effects continue to be felt over the next days into the weekend.
Tom, great stuff. Thanks so much for setting that up for us. Let's get a look at how it's been affecting people in the US. We're able to bring in now our US correspondent, David Blevins, who's in Washington. David, what's the impact been there?
Well, the scale of the impact is still developing, of course. Here on the East Coast, people wakened to news of the global outage. But what we can tell you is that at least 500 flights so far have been cancelled. American, Delta and United Airlines all reporting problems. The Federal Aviation Administration says a number of different airlines sought assistance with ground stops. Now, airlines already airborne did not instruct their pilots to land, but they did did inform them that they were experiencing communication problems, and we're hearing of long queues, particularly at airports in New York. In the Washington metropolitan area and in the New York metropolitan area, the transport authorities say they're having problems with their websites and with their internal systems, but that trains and buses are operating normally. However, trams are not operating normally in New York, and we also know that 2 large shipping terminals in New York have delayed their opening this morning. We're also just hearing that there are some problems with 911 call centres, emergency call centres. That will be a major cause for concern. And some hospitals, particularly in Boston and Ohio, have begun to report problems and have cancelled non-emergency procedures while they address those issues. The Department of Justice also reporting some problems at courts as business gets underway this morning. So it's very much a developing story, and I think the full scale of it will not become clear until people reach their desks or reach their respective workplaces and are able to establish whether they've been affected or not.
David Blevins, great stuff. Thanks so much for that report from Washington. Let's get the picture now from India, where a number of airlines have been affected by the outage. Our correspondent Neville Lazarus is there for us in Delhi. Neville, what's the latest?
Well, we are hearing that there is a slow process of normality coming to the Delhi airport, but this is just very, very slow. The disruptions have been across the country, especially in major cities of Bangalore, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Chennai. In Bangalore, the IT center of India, almost 90% of the flights at Terminal 1 were disrupted. This would have been hundreds of flights. In Hyderabad, 160 flights affected. This would have had a cascading effect on the various aviation airports across the country. The sector would have had a lot of problems. People would have been queuing up for long hours at the airports, at the check-in desk. We've heard from airlines asking passengers to come in much earlier than usual and to have patience as they would have to manually check everything, and there would have been a lot of disruptions on their systems. We've heard from hospitals that have been affected as well. One administrator telling me that his hospital was affected in the critical care department. The ICU machines which were connected with the Microsoft platform, lab tests, all of these being disrupted by this outage. Broadcasters in India have had an effect of live broadcasting, many resorting to pre-recorded messages. The Indian IT minister earlier had said that he's been in touch with the Microsoft office people, and the updates have been released to resolve the issue, though he said that the government's network on which it runs, the National Information Company, which runs all the government platforms of programs and policy, has been unaffected. But there hasn't been much of reporting on the disruptions or any major disruptions on the banking, insurance or the stock exchange. But to common people, this disruption has been just great and far wide across the country, and it will have a cascading effect further on in the day and through the night.
Neville, thanks so much as always. Neville Lazarus with that update of the impact of this IT outage from Delhi in India. Let's go next to Edinburgh Airport and join Sky's Conor Gillis for an update there.
Yeah, the temperature and the tensions have been raised in the past hour or so here in Edinburgh as a wave of cancellations have been announced over the tannoys that have been very quiet, it has to be said, for a considerable number of hours. Tensions around the lack of communication from some of the airlines involved in this global IT glitch. Queues of people here still don't know whether their flights are going or not, and there have been some issues in terms of the airlines getting that message across. This particular airline here is Ryanair, and I can tell you that they have been having issues with the electronic system for checking people in, getting them through security, and that has resulted in hundreds of people having to leave this airport with no route to their final destination. I can also tell you as well that roughly 10 flights an hour are being able to land here, able to arrive 5 in Edinburgh. Compare that in context to the usual 30. That shows you the scale of the challenge that officials here are facing. Let's have a chat with some passengers who have had their flight cancelled today. This group over here were due to go to Italy. Hi there, thanks for your time on Sky News. Just talk to us about the impact this is having on you and your family.
Yeah, so we've been there, here probably since 12 o'clock or later, so it's been already 2 hours or more. We are all pretty concerned about the situation, and of course we are tired because we don't even know what to do. We try to call for booking another flight and everything, but they told us just to go away and just try to find a hotel or something.
So I'm assuming then you were trying to go home, and you're now stranded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are from Italy. We are all Italians here with my family, and we are just pretty tired of the situation because it's been, as I already said, 2 hours now.
And clearly this is a global issue. There's not much in terms of the airports, and the airlines are trying to grapple with this. What for you has been the biggest issue?
Looks like we've lost the audio, at least, there from Conor Gillis there in Edinburgh. We certainly got the gist of the scale of the disruption there in Edinburgh Airport. Why don't we now go to airports in Europe, in Germany next? There's been disruption in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Spain and in Italy. But let's bring in Florian Neuhoff, who's in Berlin Airport. Florian, earlier you're reporting a mixture of sentiments there, as some people were able to continue their journeys almost unaffected, whilst the opposite for many others.
That's right. School holidays started yesterday here in Berlin, and people are rushing to the airport from early this morning, only to find that their flights had been cancelled as the airport was struggling with IT outages. These were able to be resolved by 10 a.m. and people coming to the airport at a later stage. Some of them were able to get their flights unimpeded. Others have had their flights cancelled, and they're desperately looking for other ways to reach their holiday destinations or to get home. In total, 113 flights have been cancelled to date, out of a 550 scheduled for the day. Now, the issue with passengers are facing who are coming now is that while the airport has been fixing their problems, some of the airlines are experiencing the same IT issues and are now struggling to process people who are trying to check in. Airlines like Ryanair, KLM, Turkish Airways and Eurowings are most affected. So some people are having a normal flight off to their holidays, other people are left stranded here in Berlin.
I mean, Florian, in terms of what's behind you, it doesn't look as bad as, for example, what was behind Conor in Edinburgh Airport. Has it been easing a little bit throughout the morning into the afternoon?
That's right. The crowds have been lifting and the queues have been getting. Who are desperate to get out have been clearing off to some extent because they're looking for alternative ways of getting home. Some are thinking of taking the trains, others are thinking of driving to the holiday destinations. So it's almost as if business is back to normal here in Berlin.
Good to see. Good to see. Florian Neuhoff for us there in Berlin Airport. Well, to discuss all of this, I'm joined by Lee Young. He's head of technical at the technology and cybersecurity firm Cyber. Lee, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
What caused all of this?
So this is inevitably caused by a CrowdStrike releasing what they class as a security update. Okay, security updates are necessary because it gives the latest version of protection for endpoint security or their users. This was effectively a bug in the system. What that means is effectively bad code, which has then had a knock-on effect to the Microsoft operating system, which has caused the majority of the issues that we're seeing now.
I mean, clearly, it therefore is a cybersecurity firm attempting to prevent their clients from getting disrupted by an external hack, but they've caused great disruption to, what, all of their customers?
Yeah, that seems to be the case in this instance. Effectively, the issue is more around the knock-on effect to the bug, more so than the actual issue, the related issue itself.
I mean, what does that mean exactly?
So the outage that has happened obviously is in conjunction with Microsoft. So effectively, it is made an issue for the endpoint platform. So that's the operating system, the Microsoft operating system. Now that, of course, has caused a huge disruption across multiple industries now. Obviously we're seeing all of this with aviation, with the healthcare at the moment, and even down to retail, where you're unable to take online payments or payments at the store. A lot of places are going cash only.
How can this be solved? I mean, CrowdStrike said they've found the issue, they've deployed a fix to it. Why hasn't everything been sorted immediately?
So while the fix can go out immediately to all of the CrowdStrike customers, there is going to be some restarting of systems that's going to be required in order to be able to get that system back up and running. And that is the part that's going to take some time, and it will obviously depend on the amount of customers. At the moment, CrowdStrike are saying it's affected somewhere in the region of 24,000 customers. So that's going to have a knock-on effect to how long it's going to take to bring every customer back up and running.
In terms of sort of errors, whether it's for long-term customer retention or whether it's global PR, have you ever seen anything as bad as this before for a cybersecurity firm?
Not for an individual cybersecurity firm. These things are very rare. Most of these bugs are ironed out in a testing phase before they go live and sent to clients and customers. How this one got through, I'm sure CrowdStrike will be able to look at that and say, where they stand with that one. But there is no effective way to alleviate issues like this. They have to have the updates pushed out, because without the updates, you're not protected against the latest forms of malware. And it's probably worth highlighting. This wouldn't just be a CrowdStrike issue. This could have affected any major player in the cybersecurity sector that constantly pushes out automated updates. There is the only protection you could potentially get for something like this is to take your updates, and rather than allow them to be applied automatically, is to apply those updates manually in a sandbox environment. A sandbox environment is an environment that is outside of a live network, which allows you to do testing and whatnot.
How easy is it for companies and individuals to change who provides their cybersecurity? I mean, in any normal type of industry, a big area like this would drive a lot of customers to try someone new next time. I mean, most of us don't even really know who's providing our cybersecurity.
Yeah. And so companies like us at Cyber, we tend to lead with what is right for the customer. And it may be on certain occasions that CrowdStrike is the correct software to use in order to achieve what the customer wants to achieve. There are obviously other versions of the software out there. Certainly with the Falcon CrowdStrike software, which is what's been affected. There are alternatives out there, but ultimately, this is just a one-off blip. If you consider how long CrowdStrike have been running for, and this is the first instance where it's happened, albeit a major one, there are companies out there. Everyone would almost be in the position where they could be in the same boat as CrowdStrike, should they not do the adequate testing before making any updates live.
Lee Young, Head of Technical at Cyber, thanks so much for joining us. Very much appreciated. We're going to have ongoing coverage of this global IT outage throughout the day here on Sky News. But after this short break, we will have the latest on the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and his sentencing and conviction in Russia. We'll be right back.
This is exactly what it was. Because the airlines were having problems. It's just as horrible as you can imagine. The hospital as well had issues. Can you imagine people that will be in emergency situations? I just wanted to round this up with you with this section. What has happened today across the world? This afternoon it's amazing. There's the trickle of airport now running. Most of them is done manually now. So this is what happened around the world today. No flights. Some broadcasting station couldn't, carry the news or anything, and businesses shut down. Some businesses were shut down. Banks, you can just imagine. Oh, wow. Anyway, I hope you just got something here. I will be bringing you some other news. If anything changes, if there's more development, I will inform you. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, click notification button so that when we're on, you will be notified. Any breaking news, you will be one of the first people to hear about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.